I think with independent filmmaking, what's important about it is being able to tell the stories that are important to us and tell them the way we want to tell them without having to go through a studio. I mean, that's what's so liberating about filmmaking.
Hello and welcome. I'm Jude DeMeglio-Trang. I'm host of the Gift of Need podcast, and I'm an observer of human need in society. And I believe that our need, instead of being burdens, can be opportunities and gifts. And I do that by having unique and wonderful guests on that tell us about their area of expertise in life and how need relates to what they do and how they live. And my guest today is Chris Carlone, and he's talking with us from Tucson, Arizona. And we're going to be talking about why we need independent filmmakers. So, hi, Chris.
Hey, Jude, it's great to be here.
Thank you for joining me. So,
Got it.
Chris Carlone has been working as a professional photographer, video editor, and videographer for almost 20 years in New York City, Los Angeles, San Francisco, and Tucson. And he's produced, shot, edited, and directed hundreds of music videos and has made several short films and documentaries. And so, Chris, would you start by telling us a little bit about your background?
Well, sure, I'd love to. My background started with music and it hasn't stopped. I've been playing in bands since I was 16 years old. And so it's now that I'm 26, it's been 10 years and I'm just joking. Yeah, throw on a few more decades to that. But that's really where my artistic passion started, was with music. And along the way, I feel like with every art form, like one art form lends to another, lends to another. It's like, and that's sort of like, I've just sort of followed the muse and the path of my passions, which kind of started with music and then evolved in my 20s to film and photography. So,
Well, folks, today we're going to be discussing independent filmmakers and how they fill a need in society. I met Chris at the 34th Arizona International Film Festival this year, where his film, Lonely Trojan, Too Young for the First Wave and Too Old for the Second, won Best Music Documentary. And we'll talk more about that in a bit. But first, let's find out more about your interest in films. So, when you were growing up, did you watch a lot of films? And what do you think it was about movies that caused you to want to be involved in creating them?
yeah, absolutely. I definitely, like so many others, was just um, at a very young age, was plopped down in front of the television and was just so taken by the worlds that I would be taken to, and through watching films. And you know, at 7 years old, seeing Star Wars in the theater was pretty life changing. Um, it hit me harder than I could have even imagined. And I feel like that sort of planted the seed of wanting to tell stories and to make films. And I feel like that's still growing to this day from that seed that was planted with Star Wars. So I've made a number of short films, which are way more on the sort of fantasy side of filmmaking. And then I've also, my features have been documentaries, music documentaries, which directly relate to my first love, as I spoke about, which is music.
Yeah. So, when you were young, were you encouraged by parents or teachers to pursue a career in filmmaking? Was that somebody like saying, you need to go do this, Chris?
No, not at all. Actually, I actually really got into it once I had moved out and I was in my 20s. Um, I got this thing called the Fisher Price camera, it was the PXL 2000, and it was only on the market for a few years. And what it was a camera, a film camera that shot movies on audio cassette tapes, if you can imagine that, which is kind of mind blowing. And it was only around for a few years, but the quality of the film was very grainy, black and white. And it was actually used in a couple of independent filmmakers' movies, like the movie Slacker. It's featured in the movie Slacker. And that's what started my love. And then I had a roommate who had a VHS camera, which were kind of hard to come by. And between the two of us, we were just, morning, noon and night, like just any chance we had, we were making movies. We didn't know what we were doing. We were experimenting, and we were just so passionate about like making weird music videos for our bands and making strange little narrative films. We were just making up on the spot, doing stop start animation, like really just like immersing ourselves in filmmaking, because it was, these Fisher Price cameras were like $100, which was, doable back in 1987. It was $100 then, was probably worth a few $100s now, but still it was like you could get one. It was very accessible. And so yeah. So in my early 20s is really when I just went for it and just got really into it.
Mm. So you've also made music videos, hundreds of them. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, music videos were really where I got it started, where I realized, oh my gosh, first of all, I'm plugged into a community. I'm a musician. I'm in like 3 bands or at least, and I know 100 bands, and bands need music videos. And so I just started by doing it for my own bands and realized, hey, people saw them and they were like, I want one of those. You're really good at this. And so I realized, wow, I only had like iMovie, which came with my iMac. And I didn't even have like Final Cut Pro or anything at that point. And I just started doing it. And really, that's always kind of been the way I've done it, is I just do it. I just do it. Even if I don't know what I'm doing, I'm going to figure it out. But, but, but being in that music community, it was like, to this day, it's really like been my bread and butter, because I'm so connected in that community, and it's something that bands need. And really, to be honest, it's just super fun making music videos, and it's a pretty quick turnover, and everything about it is very like just so doable for the artist and for me to quickly turn out really nice products for the artist and to make a living.
Yeah. Do you produce those music videos? And in that process, then, how do you come up with the ideas? Like I mean, each band is so different. Do you study their music, you know them, or you just, like have dreams at night, or how do you do that?
Yeah, there's so many different ways. It's a great question. Sometimes an artist might come to me and they might be very like specific about what they want, and they've really thought it out, and they've got a very clear vision. And that's great, because you want to like deliver what their dream is and what their very clear vision is. Uh, so in some ways that's kind of an easy thing, and it's difficult too in a way, because they have such a clear vision. But on the other side of the spectrum, some people are like, I have no idea what I want. I love what you do. Like, here's the song. Tell me what you think. And so in those cases, like a lot of times I will just blast the music in my headphones and just see what hits me right away. And I'll be like, oh, okay. Oh my gosh. Yes. This is going to be, you know, we're going to make this a really artsy music video. And we might have this reoccurring theme of, a cat and, whatever it is that comes mixed with some shots of you singing, but we're going to shoot it through a drinking glass, and it's going to have in-camera effects that'll be really strange and distorted. So like really the music has always been an immediate, like, I'm such a visual person. So like and I guess also, what is it? An auditory person, and that like the combination, it creates something immediately in my mind. And so I can just present that and say, hey, what do you think about this? This hit me right away. And they'll be like, let's do it. Or, or they might be like, I've only got this one little idea. Can you help me build on that? So really, it just depends on what they need. And it's that part of it for me usually comes pretty quick.
Mm. Well, you're also a musician. You play drums, keyboard, some other things I know. So in 2023, you completed a feature documentary about the Tucson underground music scene of the 1980s, and it was called A Tale of Two Houses, which appeared in several film festivals across the US. So you're not only a musician, which helps in this, but you seem to have a keen interest in music and bands and the local scene and stuff. So tell us just a little bit about A Tale of Two Houses.
Sure. A Tale of Two Houses is sort of my love letter to the music scene of Tucson, Arizona in the 1980s, which really there's, if somebody were to be like, hey, have I heard of any of the bands? Probably not, unless you were in Tucson in the 1980s. But what makes it a special movie, and what I think makes it a film that people that are perhaps of my generation, Gen X, and that are music lovers like myself, is that I find that like most college towns in America in the 1980s, they had these party houses that were like the hub of music scenes where bands would really like, try to play their first shows, and touring bands would play there. And, every college town's got one probably. I've heard from so many people, oh my gosh, I loved your movie because it reminded me of where I grew up. We had the same kind of house. And so this film is really about these two houses that were the hub of the underground music scene in the pre-internet era. And it's, like I said, my love letter to that time in history, in music history, and in the history of the city I grew up in.
Mm. So the 1980s was the music was your era. What were your music and band influences? The ones that you liked and that you listened to and
Yeah, I love the 80s. I wouldn't say specifically that that's my era. I was born in 70, so I grew up in the 70s. A lot of musical inspiration from that in a big way. 80s, obviously, I'm coming of age in the 80s, and that was a huge inspiration. And then in the 90s, I was 20 to 30 years old. So yeah, between those three decades, rock and roll would be like, I have a huge love of music, of every kind of music you can imagine, really, like anything you can imagine. Um, However, I would say if I had to pick one, that would be like, pick the genre that describes you the most, it would definitely be rock and roll. And there's something just about just the passion, and the rawness, and the like, it hits me here. And that's what I think is the key to inspiration, is like something that hits you in the gut, and makes you go, wow, yes, just want to just go wild.
right, right. Well, and so this is how I met you, Chris. The band that he did his feature documentary for this Arizona International Film Festival submission this year was the band my son-in-law, Gerard Schumacher, was part of, the Lonely Trojans. And Gerard and my daughter Johanna live in Melbourne, Australia, which is where I am today. And but he had lived in Tucson for 20 years from the time he was a teenager on, which is where they met. And during that time, he was in several different punk bands as either a bass player or a drummer. And so Gerard and his bandmates, Chris Morrison and Dave Pankinier, flew into Tucson to be at the premiere showing of your film, and then did a reunion concert at a local club. So we got to be part of all of that while we were in Tucson. So what on earth inspired you to do a film about the Lonely Trojans?
Well, so right after A Tale of Two Houses, after that went to film festivals and screened a few times. Um, Chris came to me and said he approached me and said, "I have this box of VHS tapes from back in the day from the Lonely Trojans, and I was wondering maybe you could digitize these for me just so I have them. And if you wanted, I could throw you some money. Maybe you could just make something, make an art piece, or make like anything you want out of these movies that you digitize." So um, I thought to myself, Chris is such a great writer, and maybe you could write me a poem and I could add some visuals to it. Well, what happened was Chris came to Tucson for a visit to visit his father. And I said, well, if you're going to be in Tucson, like, we might as well do an interview, right? Let's do it. So I had begun on this project. I was digitizing all the tapes. So I interviewed Chris and I found out, oh my gosh, Chris is an incredible storyteller. And he told the whole story from when he first discovered this band, The Jam, which inspired all of his love of music. So it started from that all the way to when the Lonely Children broke up. And by the end of the interview, he is such a good storyteller. There was such a perfect beginning, middle, and ending to this. He had tears in his eyes. You could tell it meant so much to him, his friendship with these guys and what this band meant to him, that I thought to myself, oh my gosh, I have a perfect movie with this story. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to interview people now and just drop in their interviews into his story, which will be the sort of like through line through the whole movie. And so that's what I did. And to go back a little further, just to end and to answer your question more complete, why? I mean, the Lonely Trojans were, for me, they were probably one of my favorite bands when I was a teenager in Tucson, Arizona. I just loved the Lonely Trojans. I would go to all of their shows and became friends with the guys, and just was so excited by the possibility of making something for them to remember them by, for to you know keep their legacy alive, because I think they were a wonderful band, especially if you're into that kind of music. And I'm hoping people in the future get turned on to their music from this film.
Yeah. Well, tell us about the process and the timeline then. So you started with this interview with Chris, thinking you'd do something for his posterity, but then you had to work on this film with people in 3 different parts of the world, right? So, that was interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. I kept it simple, and there was pretty much a zero budget for this thing. So really, like, I did my interviews over Zoom, and I did a number of interviews, and I just kept plugging away at it. I feel like that's you know the hardest part. The interviews are the fun part because you get to talk to everybody, you get the stories, um, and you get to develop like what you think will be the film. But then getting down to the nuts and bolts and doing the editing, that's always the part. That's like the, pulling teeth part. I literally put a sign up in my studio above my computer that said, it's not going to edit itself. Because sometimes you just think, just by doing the interviews, like, hey, we're working on this movie, but nope, it's not going anywhere until you sit down and you even just put in a little bit of time every day. And eventually it just happens if you just don't stop. It's like there's always a period with both of my features that I've done where I feel like I sort of checked out for about 3 or 4 months because it was so overwhelming. And that's okay, because I think that's part of the process. And so, yeah, but eventually I got there finally. And thank God I did, because what came from it was really special.
Yeah, my friend reminds me whenever I get in the middle of massive projects that you're in the messy middle. You just have to push through. Sometimes you have to back off and give it a minute, rather than just plugging through if you don't have the inspiration. Some things you can't wait for inspiration, but So finding
It's so
funding,
true.
yeah, finding funding for independent filmmakers is rough, right? I mean,
That's
nobody's
always
usually,
the
yeah, I mean, isn't that the bottom line? Is that I think
it
about
really
that.
is.
Yeah, there must be an audience for all of the indie films that are being made, and there's needs that major motion pictures don't meet. But you can understand very clearly that it relates to money because there's got to be a return on investment, right? So they look and they say, well, is the Lonely Trojans going to be a worldwide success or not? Oh, I don't think so. So we're not funding it. But um, I think about I think about some of the indie films that over the decades have broken into the mainstream market and become commercial successes. I mean, there's things like Napoleon Dynamite, Pulp Fiction, right? Slumdog Millionaire even was an indie film in India. My Big Fat Greek Wedding, one of my all-time favorites too. The Passion of the Christ by Mel Gibson. I mean, he had to do it himself. Easy Rider. So um, thinking about that, then what do you think are some of the needs then that when major motion pictures who have to make money because they're paying all these millions of people and their leaders at the top need billions, what are some of the needs that major motion pictures don't meet and why we need independent filmmakers?
Yeah, I mean, I think really like it's interesting. There's different levels of indie filmmaking, right? You were talking about like, like some of these films that you mentioned are still considered indie films because they're not doing it through the major studios. And that's at its core, whether you're at the highest level of indie filmmaking or at the level that I'm at, which is the absolute lowest level, not low, like it's bad quality, but low in budget,
Right.
right? I think they both actually kind of um, do the same thing and in what is important in indie filmmaking, which is like you said, Mel Gibson wanted to tell the story and none of the studios wanted to touch that. And that's how he did it. He funded it himself. I think with independent filmmaking, what's important about it is being able to tell the stories that are important to us and tell them the way we want to tell them without having to go through a studio. I mean, that's what's so liberating about filmmaking is like, I mean, on the lower end, on the budget level, it's like, wow. I mean, with the passion, with the drive, you can tell whatever story is you need to tell, and you can just and that will really literally just take you finding the people and the right people who want to be a part of this thing and bring this thing to life. And I think there's so many levels of what is beautiful and amazing about independent filmmaking. One is being able to tell the story you want to tell and do it the way you want to do it, like, and not answer to anyone. And two is just, like what's beautiful about filmmaking is like, it's the most like collaborative, like incredible, like art form where you're bringing people together to make this thing, that is, um, special stuff. And so, but yeah, so that's a really interesting question because I think like I said, on the highest level or on the smallest level, they sort of like, they're sort of doing the same thing, and that is, being able to do it your own way and be very authentic.
Yeah. Well, it's funny. I think about myself and this podcast. I've talked with my engineer and other friends. It's been hard for me to gain like a massive social following because I have guests from all over the spectrum. I mean, totally random. I have people talking about eternal life, and I have people talking about filmmaking, and people talking about their sexual abuse experience. And I feel like you do. I do some famous people who have written books, but I do a lot of people that have, nobody's going to give them a voice to share their story, right? I think
Right.
like the woman who shared about her sexual assault, and she is working on a local level to help victims of sexual assault. Nobody, no big podcaster is going to give her a voice. And I feel that her story is important and I want that out there. And same, so I feel like in a sense, we're kind of doing the same thing. And I was going to ask
Right.
you
No, I
that, on the
appreciate
flip
that so
side,
much.
yeah, well, on the flip side of the need in society to have authentic voices brought to them that they wouldn't hear otherwise, then we have to go back to a lot of time and effort goes into filmmaking, just like all the time and effort I put into this podcast, right? So we have to assume that there's an underlying driving force for you to make it worthwhile, especially for you other independent filmmakers. So why do you do it? What need does it fulfill in your life, and how would you describe that to us?
Yeah, there are many levels of that. And I think just on a level of, because I do so many different types of art. I'm a filmmaker, a photographer, I'm a musician, and I'm a movement artist, I'm an actor. I've done all these things for the last 30 years. And it, I mean, it's so important to follow that spark, that passion, that bliss, that, I mean, that is to me truly, like, there are two things in the world, there's um that are so important. There's following your passion and your happiness and your bliss, and trying to stay in that state, and love, like, those two things are, and they go hand in hand too, because for me, making art is my love, is. And so when I get excited by something, and I just go and go and go. And one of the things that I would say, one of my strengths is, somehow I'm able to, for some people it's difficult to finish things, and somehow I'm able to finish things because I'm not so worried about those things being perfect. I just want to do them and learn from them, and just because I follow the muse of that moment, creatively. So that's one of the things that I get from it, is just, to stay in the state of following my bliss and my passion. And then the other for me so far with these two feature films has been bringing people together and doing these documentaries like you were talking about. These guys flew from different parts of the country and the world, all to be there for this documentary. And they hadn't even been in a room together in 30 years. And the band reformed and played like the night after the premiere of the movie, which to me is like, that's like an ultimate dream of mine, to see the Lonely Trojans again in my life. And to know that this film made that happen is just, it's so 10 times worth any amount of time I came down to my studio and was like, oh my God, I have to do this. I mean, it's so worth it to bring people together. And my first film did the same thing as well. It was screened at the Loft and sold out 330 seats or something. And people flew from all over the country, hadn't seen each other in decades. And it was just so special. So yeah,
Well,
those two things are.
Well, and I know from having been with Gerard and Chris and Dave and been to the concert, it was such a gift and a blessing to them. And in you serving them in this way and fulfilling your passion, you also met the need in their lives. I mean, they were crying when they talked about their experience and getting to experience this, like they never thought they'd ever be together again and play. And of course they did a massively great job, and everybody in the crowd, was just going crazy over it. And that was your gift to them, and then their gift. So how would you encourage young people who have an interest in filmmaking? Where do they start? And what are some of the important things for them to focus on, while they're in school, high school, and then also after high school and college?
Just just go after it, just make mistakes, just have fun. Don't worry about the outcome. Don't worry about like, I need to make this amazing film. Make a really bad film, just have a great time. We are blessed in this time that we live in with these things, as much of like, as awful as they are, they're also incredible creative tools. Like the camera on this thing is bonkers. Like if I could have had like this, you can film like in like 4K on this thing, and you can edit an entire film just on your phone. If you're paying for one of these things, like just go. You can get apps for this that look like Super 8 movies. You can get apps for this that look like VHS cameras. Like, I mean, whatever your style is or your passion, everything is on this thing. And then I would say, like, immerse yourself in other sides of it. Um, like be a production assistant on someone's movie, be an extra in someone's movie. Like just immerse yourself in it on in every possible way, because all of those experiences are going to make you so much more well-rounded, and you're going to learn so much. And just don't be afraid to fail, and don't be afraid to, to make something that isn't, this masterpiece. Just have fun and just do it nonstop, and find others that love it as well, and help them on their projects, and ask them for help on yours, and just have fun.
Yeah. That's, I think about, I was listening to a book by Anne Lamott, and one of the lines in there that she said from experience in her life, knowing this, she said, perfectionism is a sin. And I thought about that. It's like, yes, there is a point at which, Scorsese and Peter Jackson and those people have to get down to perfectionism. But when you look at some of Peter Jackson's early films, they're hilarious. They're almost unwatchable. That's especially when you're starting, like you're saying, just go out and experiment, and don't let that monkey on your back, oh, I've got to do it perfect the first time, because you won't ever do it. You can't. Experience comes from doing things from trial and error, right? Yeah. Well,
exactly. Yeah.
Chris, anything else you want to share?
Process.
Yeah, anything else you want to share with us before we close out?
Let's see. Well, I just want to say that I love the work that you're doing, and I wanted to just tell you how grateful I am today to get to share my story. And feel free to look me up on social media. I'm easy to find on Instagram, Chris Carlone, my website, Chris Carlone Creations. But yeah, I think as for an artist, I think it's, it's wonderful to just try as many different things as you can. I think sometimes I wish I was one type of artist, but after all these accumulated years, I'm so glad that I've done so many different things, because I think it makes me, in whatever I'm doing, just that much better. So, yeah, so get out there and just live, and don't be afraid to live your life. Just experience as much as you can while we're here. And yeah, just enjoy and give as much of yourself as you can.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Chris. I really appreciate you taking the time out of your schedule to talk with us today about this, about the needs, okay, that artists have to create and have an outlet for their creativity. And then also how then that meets the needs of other people individually, and society and communities, and it brings joy and fulfillment to all of us. And that was evident from when the film was screened and the band playing. So thank you again.
Thank you so much.
Again, you can check out Chris's work by going to chriscarlonecreations.com. He also has a Facebook page that's dedicated to Lonely Trojan, a documentary that you can check out. And if I remember correctly, Chris, that documentary is not going to be put up on YouTube yet because you've entered it into some other film festivals, correct? Yeah.
Yes,
And then,
exactly. I think it'll be like October when it'll be
okay.
on YouTube.
Good. And you'll put that out on your Facebook page and stuff to let people know when they can
Absolutely.
access it. Yeah. All right, folks. The great music you're hearing was written and performed by Gabe Kubanda at Kubanda Music. You can find him on any streaming platform. My engineer is Ray Ingenieri of 3rd Street Productions in Tucson, Arizona. Great guy. Does a lot of work for me. And if you would consider following my podcast and go to my Substack page where you can access the podcast and all of the articles and follow me there. You can leave a comment there for me or Chris, and we'll get back to you. Thanks, folks. Bye.